Hello, I'm Dave Moore with PITC, and today we're going to be going over the testing procedure for a DCVA. The model DCVA that we're going to be testing today is a FEBCO 850 3/4 inch device. The first step that we're going to do when we test this device is we're going to flush our test cocks of any grit or debris that's gathered inside over the year. Once we've flushed our test cocks, we're going to ensure that our hoses are wrapped around the center line of our device, the hose that we're not using, our low side. And then we're going to take our high side hose and connect it to test cock number 2. We're then going to pressurize our gauge and bleed any air out of it. Once we've pressurized and bled our gauge, we're going to isolate our device. The first check that we do on a DCVA is checking our check 1 and forward, or a pressure differential across check 1. We have a minimum spring tension on check 1 of 1 psi, so this test must maintain above 1 psi for a time period of 2 minutes. I'm going to do this by opening up test cock number 3 in front of test cock number 2. Our gauge is settled out around 2.8, 2.6 psi. That's well above our 1 psi minimum. As long as our gauge holds constant for 2 minutes, that would be recorded as a pass, and we'll move on to the next step of our test. We're going to shut our isolation valve, our test cocks. We're going to re-establish pressure in our device. We're going to move our high hose from test cock number 2 to test cock number 3. We're going to pressurize and bleed our gauge again. The next test we're going to do on our DCVA, and then isolate our device. The next test that we're going to do on our DCVA is we're going to check 2 of our checks at one time here. The first check we're doing here is we're checking our check 2 and forward, or a pressure differential across check 2. Again, on check 2 in a DCVA, we have a minimum spring tension of 1 psi, so we must maintain above 1 psi for a 2-minute period. The second test we're going to do during this step is testing check 1 in reverse pressure, or our seating power of check 1. We do this by opening up test cock 4 first. This is going to display our pressure differential across check 2, well above our 1 psi minimum, and holding steady. So at that point, we're going to open up test cock number 2, and now we're testing our seating power in reverse against check 1. We must maintain, again, above 1 psi constant for 2 minutes during this test. We're holding at 2.2 psi. As long as that held constant for our 2-minute count, that would be recorded as a pass, and we'll move on to the next step of our test. We'll shut our test cocks, re-establish pressure in our device, and move our high hose from test cock number 3 to test cock number 4. During this step of the test, we're going to be checking our check 2 in reverse. We're going to pressurize and bleed our gauge. Isolate our device, and then open up test cock number 3. At this point, we're reading a pressure differential of 65 psi approximately in test cock number 4 and 0 psi here. So our differential is too great for our gauge, so we're just going to open our bleed valve and drop that gauge pressure to a readable level. We must maintain a constant pressure here for 2 minutes. So as long as our needle remains constant at 6 psi for our 2-minute time period, we would record that as a pass. We would close our test cocks and return the device back to service.